Hi everyone. Sleeping yet or waiting for lunch? We're going to talk about cybercrime and cyberwar today, which is going to be a little off the beaten path topic, I hope, from the hardcore technical O-Day stuff. And what I'm going to try to do during the talk is connect the dots. See how cyberwar, is connected to cybercrime and in which ways. We're going to talk about the definitions of cyberwar and cybercrime very quickly because we're kind of short on time. And basically after that, we're going to review a few events that happened on the cyberwar arena and see how they connect back to cybercrime. Connect the dots, talk a little bit about the future, and if time permits, a quick Q&A. So first of all, what basically brings me here? I'm Iftach Amit. As was mentioned before, I'm a academic. I don't have a CSSP or C anything, just a computer science degree. I'm a hacker. I like to tinker with things, break them, try to reassemble them, not so successfully. I'm a researcher. I've been doing research with security companies for the past 5 or 6 years, managing the security research and doing some research on my own. My main focus has been cybercrime and the tools and the economics behind it, and we'll see how that led to the current research that I'm presenting here. I used to manage software development, and back in the old days I used to actually develop software, which I only do now for fun. And in the spare time of whatever this allows me to, I'm doing my reserve duty back in the Israeli Air Force, helping them with security stuff. This talk is not going to be fun, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to avoid any kind of buzzwords or rumors or whatever it is and stick to the facts. If you do, however, catch me on something that's complete bullshit, I'm sorry, just throw something at me or raise your hand and I'll be more than happy to listen to whatever you have to say. So how did we get here? As I mentioned before, my core research has been on cybercrime. What led me to look at cyberwar and all of that fancy stuff? Well, it started off with things like this. Oh, you can't see this. That sucks. I'm sorry. What you're seeing here, or what you're not seeing here, is a map with 2 red circles in it and GPS coordinates and notations that you really can't see that says target 1 and target 2. This was found on a criminally operated server that had a lot of private information, credit cards, bank information, and suddenly we saw this. We also, in the same kind of document or document area, we saw additional information that started looking like this really isn't a typical cybercrime operation. This is not something that you can sell very easily over the internet, which cyber criminals do a lot of times. And it struck us that this is military stuff. This is targeting and airplanes being controlled and traced, like F-16s and there we go, F-16s and Apache helicopters, and target notation and hit ratio and so on and so forth. So, scratch my head for a little bit, and I'm like, all right, if they can't sell it, they have to pass it somewhere. Last year, when I was doing this cybercrime research, I came up with an idea of kind of low-jacking those documents, low-jacking the information to see where it ends up, to see where it reappears in the criminal world. And what we did manage to see is that it was traded or passed along back to non-criminal and non-corporate organizations, i.e. governments. So someone's spying on someone else. Therefore, this research. Our problem so far has been that we have been examining these kind of things. What is this? Anyone? Yeah. Can't see shit. What is this? Come on. Yeah. It's a bullet hole. All right. What does it mean? It means that someone shot at something and there's a bullet hole, right? This has been our context or our focus as security researchers and in general the security community for ages now. This is what we're trying to do here. Get a context. All right? A bullet hole can be part of a gangbang drive-by, all right, shooting some car in random, or for ransom, or whatever it is, or it can be part of an act of war. All right? We have been so focused on the actual bullet hole that we haven't taken the time to step back and see, all right, what's the context, what's the motive? And this is exactly what we're going to try and do here, and connect events that we've seen in the past with the actual context. The actual difference between crime and war is not that big. All right? Besides the funding that may come from different places and the expertise that needs to be gathered or built, usually on the warfare side, in-house, using like a government or a military, and on the criminal side, we just buy whatever is possible. The rest is very similar, and that made our job pretty hard in trying to connect those criminal and war activities. So let's start with cyberwar. This is the Wikipedia definition of cyberwar. Cyber warfare is the use of computers and the internet in conducting warfare in cyberspace. I say bullshit, all right? This is like very vague and doesn't really mean a lot to in the general context. So we'll try to start bashing this definition. Some people actually say that there is no cyber warfare, all right? It didn't happen yet. And they usually pretext that with like, besides Estonia, or Georgia, or Titan Ray in China, or Adobe, or Google, or you get the point, all right? Some people who are getting paid a lot of money and have government jobs say there is no cyber war. Anyone knows who this is? Nothing. No. It's across the pond. It's about 6 or 7 hour flights from here. This is Howard Schmidt. He's the what do you call it these days? The cyber czar in the U.S. He's responsible for all the U.S. defense and attacks online. All right. He was quoted a couple of months ago, saying there is no cyber war. Well, if there's no cyber war, what do you do for a living? And what we're going to try and do is connect the dots and see how there is cyber war. By the way, cyber war is not just this. All right. Maybe Howard meant, the Kremlin is not attacking the White House. So it's not just this. It's also not just spy versus spy, very covert. It's happening every day, and it's being commissioned by governments. And as such, civilians are always going to be hurt. These are the nations or the states that are connected with developing cyber warfare capabilities according to McAfee. And this is from the Virtual Criminology Report in 2009. And McAfee noted 5 top countries that are developing advanced defensive cyber capabilities. You have the usual suspects: US, Russia and China, France and Israel. I'm going to focus on almost the same suspects. I was just moved France away because, well, it's easy, and they're just, okay. And added Iran because of more recent activity coming out of there. So let's cover some basics in terms of those countries. The U.S. has a fairly well-documented cyber warfare or online attack defense capabilities. You have the usual suspects within the U.S., NSA, FBI, and of course the USC, the United States Cyber Command, that was just recently established in Fort Bragg. That includes Air Force, Marines, Navy, and Army cyber commands all together, focusing on red team, blue team, and everything behind them. Massive recruiting going on. It's fairly easy in the U.S. because you can recruit non-military personnel and just have them work for the military. So that's fairly easy and fairly well documented. Russia, as much as it may sound weird, it is fairly documented as well. Besides the fact that they moved through that communism to democracy era, and some names changed, like the KGB that turned to FSB, we still have the SVR that focuses on external and anything outside of Russia, FSB focusing on everything inside of Russia, the GRU focusing on everything, and I kid you not, there's an organization there called the Center of Research of military strength of foreign countries. I mean, you can't be any more specific than this. All right, this basically defines what they do. And that also includes a lot of online capabilities for those countries. Last but not least, in terms of Russia, I have to mention NASHI. NASHI is the National Youth Organizations. They're kind of political parties for kids or something like that. They're tightly controlled by the political parties and tend to carry out a lot of the dirty stuff that you don't want to get really connected to. So if some politician says, well, I don't like this and that person or this and that country, and I'd like to see their website go down, he says that in the NASHI kind of get-together, and suddenly you see a lot of little Russian kids DDoSing or doing some stupid things to websites. But it works. Next up, China. China is like the big black hole of the internet. Not just because they have a very strong firewall and tight access on the internet, but people tend to give China like a very, very scary image. Well, it's not that scary. And again, there is quite a lot of documentation out there on what China is developing or what China has in terms of online attack and defense capabilities. So in China, it's very easy. Everything falls under the PLA, right? The People's Liberation Army. Do some homework. I'm not going to reiterate this here again and again. There's a report written by Northrop Grumman last year that goes across all the Chinese army, points out the different organizations there, specifically look for the 4th and the 3rd departments, the general staff departments that are responsible for attack and defense. And it's fairly well documented, and yes, Titan Rain happened. There are connections between the guys that ran Titan Rain, like China Eagle and those kind of hackers, back to the Chinese government. I was in China last year, giving a talk there in the conference, and I met Titan Rain. So it's he's now working for the government. Surprise, surprise. Iran is really a black hole because these guys know their stuff and they're really anal about controlling it. So in Iran, the internet is very tightly controlled by the army. The army is basically working with the government who owns the telecommunications infrastructure company. That's how it's called. This is their internet connectivity from 2000, from 97. This is 2000. This is 08. This is in terms of fiber optic cabling for internet access in the country. So they have very huge pipes, and a lot of people who are interested or have a vested interest in conducting online attacks. Last but not least, this is going to be the most boring slide ever because I can't talk about most of the stuff, so I picked up from Google all of that. Israel. In Israel, we have the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, that keep adding cyber attack capabilities and are really focused on recruiting a lot of people. They're actually in the process of forming like a 5th regiment or something like that is just cyber warfare. So here's from Aviation Week. Right now, each corps has its own command control, communication, and computers and intelligence branch within it. It's called C4I in Air Force, Marines, and Army, and the intelligence. Staffing is mostly homegrown, so people get drafted when they're 18. If they know something about computers, they usually get to those military units. If not, they go and fight tanks like I did. And oh, by the way, Mossad, not so secret. They have a website. If you want to know what's going on, if you want to know what they're focusing on in terms of building capabilities, just go to the website. It's got an English version as well. And go to the job section, right? And try to figure out what they're looking for in terms of skills, right? It's not brain surgery. All right, so we've covered the nations. Let's talk a little bit about attack and defense. CyberWar, the way I see it, is a highly selective targeting of military and critical resources in conjunction with a kinetic attack. Okay? This is like the true meaning of cyberwar. It's just like any warfare, it's the application of force in different directions strategically to get to a point. All right? So in conjunction with a kinetic attack. That's the main thing that was missing from the Wikipedia definition. because it's the internet, a massive DDoS in order to black out a region or black out a service, usually for propaganda and changing people's minds and attitudes towards them. And again, it's very easy because we have all the tools and they're freely available. On the defense side, the defense is never going to be just military, right? Because targets are going to be civilian. You can't just defend like the military headquarters where if you attack the power grid, it'll get no power. Physical and logical protections are always going to be like a last survival act. And you will see a lot of plans that include shutdown or denial of access for civilians just to keep the service running so it won't just collapse. All right, so that's part of the tactics in defense. As you can see, it's not really even. The attack has more power or tools than the defense, but it's just how life goes. Cybercrime. This kind of sums up cybercrime. All right, if you have any questions on cybercrime, if there's any doubt if this is cybercrime or not, look for the money. If there's no money, it's usually just script kiddies screwing around. If there is money, it's cybercrime, and just follow the money. Easy. They've done that with AthCon back in the 50s or 60s, I can't remember, and we're still doing it today. Just like the big boys, if you wanted to make money and make money like on a grand scale, you have to work like the big boys. So cyber criminals have adapted the same kind of infrastructure and hierarchy and corporate policies that regular corporations do. So they set up, there's like a CEO, of course, that makes all the money, VPs, campaign managers that take care of actual campaigns that are taking place on the internet. They have channel distributors, just like us in the computer business, that spread their wealth and provide the victims all the Trojans and the malware that's used to gather that information and use it and sell it over the internet. The attack channels, again, I'm going to skip through this really quickly, are the traditional ones. It's great to follow up the extrusion testing and the extrusion penetration testing talk, because this is exactly what everyone's doing these days. They're targeting the traditional channels, web, email, commissioned attacks are done for getting to specific targets. Again, from the extrusion testing, just send an email to the right person or send a link to the right person in the company that is going to click. All right? All the rest is usually carpet bombing, just to get as much information as possible. And that's like the attacks that we're used to seeing over the internet, all the spam email that we're getting that has funky links to fake websites or to malware. And secondary infections, again, just like in the intrusion testing, take place from the already established botnets. All right, so once I have a fairly established botnet, a few thousand computers that I can control, I can then relay attacks through them and get more and more victims online. This is how it looks like. This is from my last year presentation on cybercrime, where I've mapped a single attack server and all the targets, all the websites that were compromised to include the malware. All right? As you can see, the focus is pretty clear. They're looking for the money. So it's Western Europe, the US, and some random scattered websites in other places. But this is mapping over 100,000 servers. Again, most of them are catering for victims in those areas that you're going to get money from. These are the locations for the actual organizations taking place or making money off of those infections. And again, we're looking at something very, very regional. So in order to defraud or to conduct crime in the financial system here in Greece, you have to be an expert, or at least to know how the economics in Greece works, and it's going to be completely different than how it works in China or Japan or the US or Canada. All right? So you see organizations that are focused on and actually based off specific regions in Europe and the US and the Far East. And that's where usually they focus their targets on. In terms of ammunition, again, it's going to be very quick. And we're in Greece, so this is a Trojan. This is actually a Trojan builder for Zeus, one of my favorites. You edit configuration to tell Trojan what you want it to do. You build the configuration, and then you build the loader. Loader is Trojan. Every click on this button will produce a new binary that's going to be completely different from the previous one. i.e., for antiviruses, this is hell. And this is why they push out signature files bigger than like 50 or 60 megs. And by the way, this is why they're pushing their cloud services, because in that case, you don't have to keep pushing 50 meg files every day to all the clients. You just put it on the cloud and have the clients point to it. This is how Zeus looks from the other side. This is the management panel. This was actually taken from a live botnet that we managed to gain access to. As you can see, again, you don't need to be an Uber hacker or not even a script kiddie. I mean, I can give this to my mom, and she can drill through the reports down to a point where you can see a specific computer, you can group them together, you can issue commands specifically to that group, you can browse through the files and the password, and it's just easy, all right? It's a web interface, everything is clickable, and it's not fully available on the internet, but if you have the right connections, you can get it for pretty cheap, the whole package. Defense. I'm going to be sorry because we're just not there yet. On the defense side, we have antivirus, malware, spyware, rootkey, Trojan. But seriously, it doesn't really work, right? We all know that. We keep chasing our tails in terms of more signatures and more heuristics, but as we can see from the attack tools, we're not there yet. This is an example from VirusTotal that I took about 3 months ago, almost. This is just a sample of a piece of malware that was found on a criminal server, passed through or ran it through 42 different antiviruses. Every name that you know, that you can mention, it's there. None of them picked it up. All right? A couple of weeks later, it might have picked it up, and it usually goes about like a couple of weeks later, 3 pick it up, and then 5, and then 3 weeks later, 10, and a month and a half afterwards, everyone picks it up. But by that time, it's not relevant, because the servers serving that malware keep generating new versions twice a day. That's why it works. Firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, again, the last presentation showed that it's really not the solution, because everything goes by port 80, 443, and 53. And not even talking about SSL that encrypts everything, which renders all those devices completely blind. So that's the defense side. Again, a pretty clear picture of attack versus defend, where the defense side is lacking. So how does these two connect? My claim is cybercrime is being used to conduct cyberwar. All right, nations and states and countries are actually commissioning their black ops and dirty work to cyber criminal organizations with the huge added benefit of having complete plausible deniability. I mean, they're like, it wasn't us. It's the criminals. All right, it's part of criminal organizations. So let's look at some history and see how these do connect. I'm going to have to start with Estonia, because Estonia is a big deal, and some people make like careers over the Estonia story, and you can read all about it. There are tons of reports. The bottom line is that civilian infrastructure was targeted, was used to target attacks on civilian infrastructure. Okay, and most of the attacks came, as I said, from civilian networks. So how does that work? We'll see in a second. Georgia, it's a copy of Estonia, but with an actual application of a warfare. Here we've actually seen the kinetic and the cyber attacks synchronized and working together. Targets were still mostly civilian on the cyber front, and were launched still from civilian networks, just like in Estonia. Now, how does that work? Russia was the aggressor there, or was attacking on the online front. And if you're dealing with Russia, you've got to know these names. Anyone doesn't know one of the names here? I got one. All right. These are all basically cybercrime organizations. RBN, Macolo, EST Domains, RealHost. These are all organizations and actual companies that provide either internet access or hosting facilities or whatever to whoever wants to buy it. And the big deal about these guys is that they provide it with what's called a bulletproof plan, so that if I'm buying services from one of these guys, part of the contract or part of the agreement is that they're never going to give me out. I mean, if I can host whatever I want there, from child porn to malware. If anyone comes up to them and says, ooh, there's a site with XYZ on it, take it down, they're going to go like, all right, maybe. They're going to notify me, I can move the server to another address, and then they're going to say, all right, let's put it down, but I still have it running. So this is how it maps out in terms of how these organizations work together with the government and the criminal side. They're spread all around the world, mostly connected to Russia, and this is just one example. All right, so Ukraine Telegroup and HostFresh are hosted by Trigo, which is a customer of EST Domains, and EST Domains is a customer of RBN, the Russian Business Network, which, by the way, at some point of time was thought to be taken down, but it actually moved to China for kind of the heat wave to go over, and then they moved back to Russia. And the network providers for RBN are UKR Telegroup and HostFresh, which again hosted RBN when it was under scrutiny in kind of the general public. And oh, by the way, the RBN and the Colo, which I mentioned before, are connected to the Russian government, either through personal connection or actual affiliation with Russian government officials. Hence, they're still running. And oh, by the way, EST Domains, RBN, and the Colo are associated with known criminal organizations, not just cybercrime, by the way, but also organized crime in some places. So after mapping out how it kind of works for Russia, it's pretty easy to figure out how the attack took place and how it was commissioned. Back to Georgia, all right, this is what happened at the beginning of the online attack. There was a distributed denial of service issued by command control servers in Russia that said flood the president's website. That was going on for a couple of days, and then it kind of subsided as the troops were crossing the border. All right, so we have a preemptive attack to affect the general public kind of state, and then troops crossing the border. A few days of silence, and guess what? 6 new command control servers come up and start attacking Georgian sites anywhere from government to media. All right, again, affecting the public image, affecting the public itself in Georgia as part of the actual warfare that's going on the ground. But let's stick to the online side. Those same command control servers were also used to carry out attacks on commercial sites. All right, kind of, you know, the criminal operation is still in business. So it was attacking porn sites for extortion, adult escort services, Carder forums. Anyone remember Carders.cc from last month? Kind of the same stuff. Gambling sites, web money, web gold, flus, whatever it is. Again, carrying out the traditional cybercrime organizations while conducting cyber warfare in conjunction with kinetic attacks from Russia. All right. If it can't be any clearer than that, to connect the dots, then I'm out of luck. So Twitter was taken down in December 18th. All right. Attack was attributed. No one heard of Iranian Cyber Army until December. But if you look very closely and you dig into the criminal side of things rather than the political side of things, you may notice, or if you're in the business, you may know of a group called AthCon. It's a Shiite group based out of Iran that's running a hacker forum. And a couple of months before December, there was a subgroup created within it that's called the Iranian Cyber Army. Okay? Now, AthCon is a criminal operation. Iranian Cyber Army is doing political stuff. We'll see how that connects. This is how AthCon's attack looked like, and still looks like. It's the same template being used by the Iranian Cyber Army again and again, and this is just attributed to AthCon. Now, what's going on in that AthCon group? Okay, if you go to the forum, you may find a very interesting section in the forum. It's called War Games. It's just called War Games, I kid you not. In the War Games, what's going on is very simple. The group leader, or some of the leaders, say, all right, this is the next target. This is the target practice. All right, and this is within the Iranian cyber army subgroup. The rules are very simple. You have, and this is all in Arabic. Farsi, I don't know Farsi, but I have people that translated it. It's basically rules of engagement, what needs to be done. All right, how many points you get. It's a capture the flag for criminals or terrorists or whatever it is. So you have a point system, you have targets. The main goal is to get data and get control over systems. And it kind of escalates down to the point of, if you can't get any of the fancy stuff, just bring the site down. All right? Guess what they've been practicing on? This is the Chester County Natural Gas Authority in South Carolina, US. It's a natural gas company. All right? And this is just target practice for these guys. All right? So it's kind of clear how, how it works in those groups. And it's rather clear who gives the orders in terms of what attacks or what targets you should pick. I mean, criminals can't get much from this kind of company. Governments, on the other hand, remember the power facility that that provides power to the cyber command center? Yeah, that's kind of how it works. Quick question. Again, this is kind of history or whatever it is. What else happened on the 18th? Something very, very, out there. Very important, connected to Iran. Yeah, I didn't know that either. But if you look at December 18th, that's the day that Twitter was hacked, this also happened. And this is a big deal. I mean, if it would happen today, like right now, the media would be all around it, all over it, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Iranian troops basically seized an oil well in Iraq. That means troops marching over the border, pointing guns, and taking over an oil well. Okay? And when did this all happen? December 18th. Coincidence? I don't think so. Same MO was used with Baidu, by the way, a couple of months ago, when Iran again took away Baidu, this is the Chinese largest search engine, because they were pissed at them. So this is a quick map of what's going on in Iran in terms of cybercrime, cyber war. ASEAN is business, all right? It's all business, DDoS, defacements, botnets, credit card theft, the traditional stuff that we're all used to. Iranian Cyber Army is a subgroup of ASEAN, focused specifically on strategic attacks on the US, China, whatever it is. The border between crime and war, again, not very definitive. Pretty easy to see how that kind of works for the Iranian government using criminal organizations to carry out their attacks. Last example, China. Are we on time? Good. All right, China. Chinese are doing a pretty good job in terms of their Chinese firewall. It fences off most of the population from doing stuff and looking and gaining access to publicly available material. But on the other hand, it's a proving ground for a lot of cyber attacks. You can get very cheap Chinese hosting for anything you want without any scrutiny. Again, RBN moved over in 2008 temporarily, and this is moving over like a big AS section of the internet to China until all the public scrutiny subsides, and then they moved it back to Russia. So China is very hacker-friendly, so to speak. January 12th, Google announces it was attacked by China. China is attacking us. Not as in we lost a few minutes of DNS hack like Twitter, but as in we are really out there hacked. I'm quoting David Drummond, an SVP at Google. He's talking about a highly sophisticated and targeted attack. And again, extrusion testing, going into the network, gaining access to critical infrastructure, in Google's case, the accounting system and the source system and so on and so forth. Yeah. Same thing happened with Adobe, all right? Adobe's official blog talks about the sophisticated, coordinated attack. Again, coordination is key here. It's getting to the right people at the right time to get into their PCs. The MO was the same. I was part of the kind of after investigation in a few other companies, not Google and Adobe, It's the same ammo. It's an ODE in Internet Explorer. Could have just as well been used in Flash or PDF or any other of the exploits that we know to get a Trojan into that company. All right, very easy to produce. If you get that Trojan and just use it for that specific attack, it's not going to be picked up by the major AVs, like it usually gets in the mass attacks. Now, the only problem so far is that we haven't seen any sign of the attack actually commissioned by China. All right, we tracked the command control servers back to universities in China, actually 2 different universities, that have been known to host or to be forced to host command control servers. This is actually a quote from a professor in one of those universities. He admits that the school network is often used to anonymously relay attacks. Just the way it works. All right. So it's very easy, again, to say, well, it wasn't us. You see those universities; they're being attacked all the time and being used to carry out criminal attacks. As usual. From Google's blog later on, we can see that the attack was targeting finance, technology, media, and chemical. All right, not your typical government versus government stuff, but more of a I want your money stuff. So China's response was, well, it's criminal groups. And actually, after the U.S. issued this statement, we looked to the Chinese government for an explanation, blah, 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 blah. The Chinese basically said, well, it's not us. Oh, by the way, it's a hacker group, a criminal group out of the U.S. that used those university servers to hack back into the U.S. And then the whole correspondence stopped because the U.S. couldn't say, no, that was just the first hop. I mean, who... From here, quick show of hands. Who connects directly back to their network from here, from this network? Who uses Tor or a VPN or some kind of... Okay, so we're more than the silent ones. It's just the first hop. Okay, if I'm going to look at the network here right now, all I'm going to see, or most of what I'm going to see, is just the first hop to the VPN endpoint, and then the actual traffic that you're generating is going off from that endpoint to somewhere else on the internet. Plausible deniability. The China move again, just summing up the Chinese stuff. Using criminal groups to carry out the attacks. All right, perfect deniability on espionage connections. It's not us. The targets, again, hand-picked. Commercial companies, not related specifically to government targets. All right, but with enough strategic poise to enable state interest espionage. All right, Google, very, very, very commercial, but highly linked to the FBI. All right, what was attacking Google? The search, not the search engine code, source code, but the system that's used by the FBI to get information on emails and so on and so forth. State, crime, information sharing at its best. It's a win-win situation, and it's pretty easy to connect the dots. Few words about the future, and then I'm done. Anyone heard of one laptop per child? Okay, there you go. What's a one laptop per child? It's a slimmed-down version of a laptop with a slimmed-down operating system, and basically no software protection on it. What happens when you give one laptop per child to a developing country that doesn't have really a lot of money to invest in security controls over those laptops, and one of them gets infected? Well, you get a big little botnet that you can control. All right. Whoever thought of that idea didn't really think it through. All right. You got to put some kind of controls over it, because otherwise, this is what's going to happen. And guess what? This is why most of those oil PC projects are not really getting a lot of traction. So these are like the big botnets. What's up with the nations that we've seen before, developing cyber Armageddon, whatever, weaponry? Well, it's not really happened. The weapons of mass destruction online are still what we know. All right, it's still the viruses, it's still the malware, it's still the ODE exploits of stupid software bugs. There is no kill switch that's going to shut down the internet. What there is that massive connectivity that can be used to shut down specific areas or even countries, in the Estonia example, and just deny any internet connectivity. Last but not least, I know you can barely see this because it's cloudy. The cloud is the perfect example for how I can use a freely available infrastructure that's available all over the place to host my malware, to host my attack tools. And again, plausible deniability, a lot of contracts, distributed network for for cheap. Quick summary. We've seen the good and the bad. All right, the good was formal training with cybersecurity by nations. We have seen those 5, 6, 10, whatever it is, countries that are focused on gaining actual experience and gaining actual knowledge in both attack and defense. Because this is going to be the next front line. We've seen Georgia, we've seen Estonia, we're seeing the more recent attacks. Online attacks are always going to be in conjunction with kinetic attacks. Take any incident, any international incident that happened that had actual kinetic movement, it also had some kind of cyber movement on the other side. The bad side is that commercial development of malware is still big, all right? It's huge. And some of those nations are going to use that to build their own knowledge base, all right? So the ugly is where good meets bad, obviously. Money changes hands, less tracks to cover, all right? Plausible deniability and criminal operations are already creating those weapons for use, for the highest bidder. So if I'm a country and I have a pissing contest with someone else, I don't want to go out there and just attack them directly. I can just commission the attack through some criminal organization that's operating in my country, make sure it works, and bam, I'm off. Couple of words on the future. Lack of legislation and cooperation on a multinational level is creating the de facto safe haven for criminals. All right, this is the biggest problem that law enforcement is facing these days. All right, if a criminal act is being conducted in one state, but the actual IP source or the server or whatever it is hosted in another state, it's done. All right, polices don't work with each other very well. To run a case through Interpol or something like that, it's like a 2-week process, and we're talking about the freaking internet. All right, I can change my IP in 2 seconds. I can change my hosting provider in less than an hour, and change geographies on that. So we need to fix this like really fast. Once we fix this, we may be able to move over and fix the nukes problem. All right, the cyber treaties between countries that talk about how to defend ourselves, how to attack other, kind of set the rules for a cyber engagement. That's all from me today. If you have any questions, I'll be available throughout the day, and I'm not going to take any online time, so thank you very much.